Have you ever wondered why it's so easy to start something and so hard to keep going? We live in an age that glorifies immediacy. We want results in a week, transformation in a month, and success in record time. But the real world doesn't work like that. Most people fail not because they lack talent, but because they don't understand the value of small steps. That's where Japan, quietly, has been teaching the rest of the world for centuries. While the West chases intensity, the East cultivates consistency. While some try to change with force, the Japanese change with patience. They follow a simple but unbreakable philosophy, Kaizen, a powerful idea that teaches that the secret of progress isn't to leap far, but to walk every day, even if only a few centimeters. This is the art that builds masters, forges character, and creates self-discipline without pain. But what makes this method so different? It doesn't demand motivation. It demands commitment, the kind of commitment that transforms who you are. Because at the end of the day, you don't change your life by changing what you do. You change your life by changing who you are. True transformation happens when identity is rebuilt from the inside out. Christopher discovered this in the most human way possible, by failing, restarting, and persisting. An ordinary man, trapped in bad habits, who found in Kaizen a map to rebuild himself. And the most impressive part? His turning point began with something almost ridiculous: drinking a glass of water every morning. Yes, that's it. A simple gesture that made him realize that greatness begins when you keep small promises. That's how he learned that the power of self-discipline lies in repetition, not strength. This audiobook will prove to you that real change doesn't depend on luck or talent. It depends on rhythm. You will understand why the Japanese secret of consistency creates such lasting results, and how to apply that same principle to every area of your life: body, mind, work, and purpose. You'll learn that the great turning point doesn't happen suddenly. It happens gradually, until one day you wake up and realize you've already become someone different. But get ready. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been told about quick success. You'll see that haste is the enemy of wisdom, and that truly disciplined people aren't those who punish themselves. They're those who understand themselves. This is the Japanese way to master yourself, a journey of focus, purpose, and inner transformation. There are no tricks, no shortcuts. There's only the power of a well-done habit, repeated with faith, patience, and direction. And if you have the courage to apply what you'll learn here, you'll discover something that few ever find. That Kaizen isn't just about improving. It's about awakening. Awakening to a life where progress feels natural, the mind is steady, and discipline becomes part of who you are. Small steps, but an unbreakable change. Christopher was the kind of man who looked in the mirror and saw more than just accumulated weight. He saw broken promises, abandoned diets, and a mountain of regrets stacked in silence. At 40 years old, weighing 142 kilos, and with his self-esteem on the floor, he believed he had lost control of his own life. But what he didn't know was that his story was about to be rewritten with a lesson that would change not only his body, but his identity. The turning point began in an unexpected way. A consultation with Dr. Yamamoto, a man of calm speech and firm gaze. Instead of offering a miraculous diet or an aggressive workout plan, the doctor did something unusual. He offered silence, listening, and a question that disarmed Christopher. When was the last time you kept a promise to yourself? That hit him like a punch of clarity. Yamamoto introduced him to a different philosophy, born in the heart of Japan. An ancient yet powerful idea called Kaizen, the principle of improving a little every day, even when it seems insignificant. No revolutions, only evolution. Christopher realized that perhaps his defeat had never been about lack of strength, but lack of consistency. While most people chase shortcuts, he began to understand that the real power of self-discipline isn't found in grand gestures, but in small daily choices. Getting out of bed without hitting the snooze button, drinking a glass of water upon waking, walking 15 minutes before work, simple but consistent. That was where transformation truly began. The doctor explained that the human brain is a creature of habit. It doesn't respect words, only repeated actions. So, consistency became Christopher's new prayer. It didn't matter how small the victory was. Each one shaped his new identity, like a sculptor patiently shaping marble with purpose. One day, Yamamoto told him something that stayed in his mind. You don't need to change everything. You only need to change today, and repeat it tomorrow. It sounded poetic, but carried brutal logic. Every act of self-discipline was like planting an invisible seed, and the garden would inevitably grow if he watered it with consistency. In the first days, nothing seemed to change. The body was still heavy, the mirror still cruel. But inside Christopher, something began to awaken. Guilt gave way to responsibility, and laziness to curiosity. He started observing his own patterns, realizing that Kaizen wasn't a theoretical concept. It was a daily invitation to improve 1%. To apply that principle, Christopher started with something symbolic, making his bed every morning. It might seem trivial, but that act reminded him that control began with small things. The same logic applies to anyone. Before trying to rule the world, rule your room. Self-discipline begins right where you are. With time, he discovered that his problem had never been food or lack of time, but lack of purpose. And that's where identity came into play. He didn't want just to lose weight. He wanted to become someone worthy of respect, especially his own. When the who I am changes, the what I do follows. A clear example of this can be seen in people who quit smoking. Those who say, I'm trying to quit, rarely succeed. But those who declare, I'm not a smoker anymore, cut the habit at the root. Christopher applied the same idea. He stopped being a man trying to be disciplined and became a disciplined man. The difference is brutal. From that point on, every choice reflected who he was becoming. When he looked in the mirror, he saw progress, not perfection, and that kept him grounded. Consistency became the foundation of his new routine, and each small action reinforced the idea that success isn't an event. It's an identity built drop by drop. The results began to appear almost silently. Clothes fit more loosely, his face lighter. But what impressed him most was his mind. More focused, calmer, more present. He had discovered the power of self-discipline, not as a prison, but as a form of freedom. Yamamoto observed all of this with a slight smile. He knew his student had understood the essence. During one session, he said, True progress is like sunrise. At first, it seems dark, but suddenly, you realize the light is everywhere. Christopher smiled. Now he understood what that meant. What began as a meeting became a journey of self-mastery. Christopher now saw life from another perspective. Every action, every thought, every choice was an opportunity to practice Kaizen. Small steps, but always forward. And it was in that rhythm that he began rebuilding his story, one habit at a time. Without realizing it, the man who once saw himself as a failure had become an example. His body reflected his mind's balance, and the mirror, once an enemy, became a reminder of victory. He didn't know yet, but the first habit that would save him was about to be revealed by the doctor, something so simple he would doubt its power. When Dr. Yamamoto told Christopher to simply drink a glass of water every morning, he thought it was a joke. After years of diets, supplements, and broken promises, it sounded ridiculously simple, but it was precisely that simplicity that disarmed him. Sometimes, the first act of self-discipline isn't grand. It's just enough to break the cycle of inertia. Drink water. That's it. A gesture anyone could do, yet few do with awareness. Christopher began to realize that great transformation begins when you keep small promises, because each one rebuilds lost trust. Consistency became the mortar that held together this new internal structure. It was less about effort and more about follow-through. In the first days, he laughed at himself. Can this really make a difference? He wondered. But the glass of water became a ritual, a reminder that he was in control. And little by little, this practice began shaping his identity as someone who keeps his word. The body was still the same, but the mind had started to shift. It's fascinating how the human brain responds to tiny signals of progress. Each morning, when he drank that glass, Christopher felt a small satisfaction, the same feeling as crossing off a task. And that's the secret behind Kaizen. Small victories that create a quiet domino effect. Progress compounds invisibly until it's undeniable. The doctor explained that the goal wasn't the water itself, but the symbol behind it. When you start the day by winning something small, you send a powerful message to your subconscious. I'm in command. This daily act becomes the first brick of self-discipline, and bricks build castles, not intentions. Soon, the habit became a mental trigger. Christopher no longer began his days on autopilot. The gesture reminded him that sustainable change grows from consistency, not speed. He realized the secret wasn't to do a lot for one day, but to do a little forever. That was the real foundation of transformation. The same principle applies to everything. Want to start reading? Read 1 page. Want to change your body? Do 5 push-ups. Want to meditate? Close your eyes for 2 minutes. The trick is to start movement, because, as the doctor taught him, the body follows the mind, and the mind follows habit. That's Kaizen in action. With time, Christopher began to associate that glass of water with victory. It was like pressing his discipline mode button. It reprogrammed his brain, day by day, to act with intention. Self-discipline was becoming less of an effort and more of a natural expression of who he was, a reflection of a stronger identity. And that's the true power of identity. When you believe you are the kind of person who does something, the behavior becomes automatic. Christopher no longer tried to be disciplined, he was. The glass of water was living proof of that. Small, simple, but non-negotiable. It became a promise renewed every morning. Imagine if we all applied this elsewhere. An investor saving only $10 a day. A writer typing just 100 words. A student reading a single paragraph. All practicing Kaizen, building results that seem slow until they become unstoppable. Progress is invisible until suddenly it's everywhere. That's how momentum is built. The most surprising part was that change didn't require superhuman effort. Christopher didn't need motivation, only consistency. The more he followed his tiny ritual, the more he respected himself. Self-esteem, once drowned in self-sabotage, began rising again, drop by drop, like the water he drank every morning. Yamamoto would say, "It's not the glass of water that changes you. It's the commitment to the act." That sentence stayed with him. He understood that each coherent gesture echoes inside the mind, an echo that says, "You're capable." And that's how real self-discipline is born, through integrity in small actions. This practice turned into a symbol of rebirth. What began as a mechanical task became a morning meditation, a moment of silence, reflection, and intention. Christopher wasn't just drinking water. He was reaffirming his new identity. Each morning became a ceremony of self-respect and renewal. Gradually, what seemed small revealed its greatness. From that single habit, he started noticing patterns, reorganizing his routines, waking earlier, and feeling more alive. It was Kaizen guiding his path, teaching that consistency is the invisible force that moves the world. Small steps build unstoppable momentum. And when he least expected it, the doctor shared his next lesson, a concept even deeper, a philosophy that would teach Christopher that progress isn't an isolated event, but a continuous process of self-discovery. Christopher finally understood that the secret to lasting change isn't about speed, but about direction. Dr. Yamamoto introduced him to the concept of Kaizen, and that word began to echo in his mind like a mantra. It meant continuous improvement, but in practice, it represented something greater, the art of growing a little every day. It wasn't glamour, it was persistence. The doctor explained that people's biggest mistake is trying to change everything at once. That desperate chase for quick results destroys consistency before it can even take root. Christopher, once addicted to quick fixes, had to learn to appreciate slow progress and to discover the beauty of watching self-discipline bloom in its own time. He started applying Kaizen in small tasks. Instead of forcing himself to run 5 kilometers, he walked for 10 minutes. Instead of cutting all sugar, he simply halved it. With each micro-victory, something inside him shifted. It was as if his identity was being rebuilt quietly, one habit at a time, brick by patient brick. Yamamoto said that Kaizen is like sharpening a blade every day. You don't notice the difference at first, but the edge becomes sharper with each pass. The same happens with the disciplined mind. Christopher realized his strength didn't come from motivation, but from consistency. The quiet determination to repeat the basics, even when no one was watching. This philosophy applied to work, finances, and even relationships. He realized being a good husband or professional demanded the same principle: improve 1% each day. Small gestures, small attitudes, big results. Kaizen wasn't just about him. It was about a way of living that transcended goals and became character. One day, while washing the dishes, Christopher grasped the power of presence. He was no longer doing chores, but cultivating self-discipline through attention to detail. The simple act of doing something well became a form of self-respect. That's when progress stops being a goal and becomes a lifestyle grounded in awareness. The doctor encouraged him to track his improvements in a notebook. It didn't matter if he wrote, "Drank water today," or walked after lunch. The goal was to visualize consistency in motion. Christopher noticed that writing strengthened his identity as someone who follows through, someone reliable, accountable, and growing. On bad days, he reread those notes and saw how far he'd come. That prevented him from giving up. Kaizen taught him that stepping back wasn't failure. It was part of the process. Like a master craftsman, he learned that every mistake shapes character and strengthens the patience that true self-discipline demands. Yamamoto reminded him, "You don't need to see fast results. You just need to see progress." That phrase became his compass. He stopped counting calories and started counting days of consistency. The scale was no longer the enemy. It became a mirror of a life, guided by Kaizen and quiet persistence. The most curious thing was how the world reacted to his new energy. Co-workers praised his focus. Family members noticed his calm. Even his sleep improved. All of it came from changes so subtle they could have gone unnoticed. That's the power of invisible self-discipline. It builds silently, yet transforms everything around you. Christopher learned that great victories are simply the sound of accumulated progress. Consistency works like compound interest. A small deposit of effort multiplies over time. That's real wealth, the wealth of solid habits and an evolving identity. He realized patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. Slowly, anxiety began to fade. He no longer compared himself to others or sought validation. His only goal was to be better than yesterday. That focus on continuous improvement freed him from fear of failure, because Kaizen taught that failing is just another form of learning. Progress isn't linear, it's layered. The doctor reminded him, progress is invisible until it becomes inevitable. And that's exactly what happened. Christopher woke up with more energy, ate with awareness, and lived with clarity. It all started with small actions, fueled by self-discipline and consistency repeated until they became second nature. Now he didn't need reminders anymore. Kaizen had become his second nature. He knew that each small step, no matter how insignificant, moved him closer to his best self. And that self wasn't chasing perfection. It was chasing constancy. A quiet difference that changes everything. But Dr. Yamamoto still had a deeper lesson waiting, one that would unite body and mind under a single purpose. Christopher was about to discover that even the way we eat can teach us about self-control, balance, and self-discipline. Christopher thought mastering his mind was enough, until he realized his body also needed discipline. Dr. Yamamoto introduced him to a philosophy called Hara Hachibu, practiced for centuries in Okinawa, one of the longest-living regions in the world. It teaches something simple yet powerful. Stop eating when you're 80% full. A small act of self-control that also strengthens self-discipline. At first, Christopher laughed. "How can I know when I'm at 80%? He asked. The doctor calmly replied, "When pleasure begins to outweigh need." That phrase changed everything. He realized that mindful eating required the same consistency as applying Kaizen. Observe, adjust, repeat. Mastery of the body begins with mastery of the mind that knows when to stop. Eating to 80% wasn't a diet. It was a spiritual practice disguised as nutrition. Christopher began eating slower, chewing more, paying attention to his body's signals. Each meal became an exercise in self-discipline, a reminder that true control lies in the brief pause between impulse and choice. Awareness itself became nourishment. The doctor explained that samurai trained Hara Hachibu to build clarity and endurance. Eating less wasn't deprivation, it was strategy. Christopher started applying it beyond food, stopping before reacting, before spending, before judging. The same principle applied everywhere, The consistency of balance and moderation creates freedom. He noticed that most of his excesses came from anxiety, the need to fill emptiness with food, distractions, or quick rewards. Hara Hachibu taught him that true fullness comes from within. When you master appetite, you master identity. The body obeys the mind, and the mind obeys awareness. That's the quiet power of harmony. Over time, Christopher noticed something strange. By eating less, he felt more satisfied. Pleasure no longer came from quantity, but from intention. It was as if Kaizen lived at the table too, tiny daily adjustments creating massive results. Each mindful bite was a small act of respect toward his self-discipline and growth. This lesson extended far beyond food. He started applying the 80% rule to everything. 80% social media, 80% talking and arguments, 80% effort before burnout. That moderation wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Balance became the invisible muscle of consistency, giving him control without rigidity and peace without stagnation. The doctor would say, "He who masters appetite masters destiny." Christopher began to see how true that was. Most people fail not for lack of strength, but for excess. Too much hurry, too much food, too much stimulation. Hara Hachibu freed him from that cycle, shaping his identity into one of calm and self-command. This practice made him realize that eating mirrors life. If you eat fast, you live rushed. If you eat distracted, you live unconsciously. Self-discipline isn't just what you do, it's how you do it. Eating slowly taught him to live slowly, and living slowly taught him to savor every moment. And the more he applied the principle, the more results appeared. His energy increased, his mood improved, and guilt vanished, not because he won, but because he learned to stop before crossing the line. That's the essence of consistency, knowing when enough is enough. Peace often lives just before excess. Yamamoto watched his progress calmly. "You're learning to respect the body you live in," he said. Christopher began to see eating as a dialogue between mind and body. Each meal was silent training in self-discipline, and he knew there was still much to learn about control, purpose, and patience. On days of temptation, when food's aroma seemed stronger than reason, he remembered the 80% rule. Sometimes he failed, but failure also taught him. After all, Kaizen means correcting without quitting. Progress is measured in awareness, not perfection, and growth happens in the willingness to try again tomorrow. As weeks passed, the mirror reflected more than a lighter body. It reflected a new identity. He no longer ate out of impulse, but out of intention. Food stopped being escape and became fuel. Consistency was transforming even his smallest moments into lessons of self-mastery. This transformation showed Christopher that life's hardest battles aren't external, but internal. Controlling the body is simple, controlling desire is not. And through that process, he learned that Hara Hachibu wasn't just a lesson about food. It was a map for living with balance, clarity, and peace. The doctor smiled and said, "When you learn to stop at the right point, everything in life becomes clear." Christopher understood. And now, the next lesson would show him that purpose is what gives meaning to all self-discipline, the invisible fuel that keeps the journey alive. When Christopher thought he already understood the path of transformation, Dr. Yamamoto surprised him with a new question. "Why do you want to change?" The room fell silent. For the first time, he realized he didn't know the answer. And that's when his journey toward finding his ikigai began, the purpose that gives direction to self-discipline and meaning to consistency. The doctor explained that ikigai is the point where passion, mission, vocation, and profession meet. It's not just what you do. It's the reason you wake up every day. Without purpose, discipline becomes a burden. But when Kaizen connects with ikigai, every small action gains power. Routine stops feeling like obligation and becomes an expression of the soul. Christopher realized that for years he'd been changing to please others, to prove himself, to silence criticism. But that only left him empty. When he understood that transformation was an act of love for his own life and family, self-discipline stopped feeling like punishment and became a choice. He was feeding his heart, not his ego. The doctor guided him through a simple but deep exercise. If the world watched you in silence, what would it see? Christopher thought and answered, "Someone trying to change." Yamamoto smiled. then becomes someone who changes naturally. The difference between trying and being is what shapes identity, and that difference changes destinies. Finding Ikigai didn't mean abandoning his responsibilities, but giving them purpose. Working, eating well, caring for his body. Everything became a ritual of alignment. The secret was to connect every action to a greater vision of who he wanted to become. That's what makes consistency lighter. It stops being effort and becomes essence. One day, Christopher wrote in his notebook, "I want to be an example for my children." That's when everything changed. Now, self-discipline had a face, his family's eyes. When the mind tries to quit, purpose holds the rope. Ikigai transforms every fall into a reason to rise again, every obstacle into an opportunity for meaning. The doctor explained that purpose isn't found. It's built, step by step, through Kaizen. Every decision aligned with what truly matters becomes a brick in the temple of your life. Christopher began noticing that the more he lived by his Ikigai, the less he needed motivation. He acted not because he had to, but because it made sense. This applies to everyone. When you wake up without a why, the day feels heavy. But when you have a strong why, even chaos makes sense. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Ikigai is that why, the invisible engine behind self-discipline and consistency. With time, Christopher realized that purpose wasn't distant. It lived in small things. In his children's laughter, in peaceful breakfasts, in the feeling of keeping promises. Kaizen taught him to see greatness in routine, and Ikigai taught him to feel gratitude for the simple. Together, they created a balanced way to live with meaning. He also discovered that purpose changes over time. What drives you at 20 won't be the same at 40. But what never changes is the power of identity, the idea that we're shaped by what we consistently choose to do. Ikigai isn't a destination, it's a constant state of alignment between values and actions. Yamamoto encouraged him to write his statement of purpose, a kind of personal vow. Christopher wrote, "My purpose is to be useful, healthy, and present." That sentence guided every decision, every meal, every workout, every conversation. It became his compass, keeping his consistency strong even when the world tried to distract him. When discouragement hit, he returned to that statement. It was like an emotional anchor. Ikigai reminded him that self-discipline isn't about pleasing others, but honoring your own essence. Once you understand that, taking action becomes natural, because living with purpose is the most powerful motivation of all. From that moment on, Christopher began inspiring others without even realizing it. His calm, patience, and focus drew attention. People wanted to know his secret, but there was no secret, just purpose and Kaizen. True progress doesn't make noise, but it changes everything quietly. He understood that identity isn't what you say you are, but what you repeat with intention. And his Ikigai made him repeat his best every day. That's how he discovered the joy of constancy. Doing good, creating meaning, belonging. Everything else, success, body, results, became mere consequences. But the doctor knew one essential lesson still remained. Because even with purpose, humans will fail. And it's precisely failure, not perfection, that teaches the beauty of imperfection and the strength to keep going. Thanksgiving Day arrived disguised as a test. After months of progress, Christopher found himself before a table full of temptations. He gave in. He ate too much, broke his routine, and the next day felt defeated, as if all his effort had been erased overnight. That's when Dr. Yamamoto introduced a new concept, wabi-sabi, the art of embracing imperfection. The doctor explained that in Japanese culture, something imperfect isn't considered flawed but beautiful in its authenticity. Broken ceramics are repaired with gold because the cracks tell a story. "Christopher," he said, "your journey will also have cracks, and that's where your strength lives." This perspective redefined his relationship with self-discipline forever. He realized that true consistency isn't about never failing, but always returning. Disciplined people aren't those who never err. They're those who refuse to be defined by mistakes. Christopher understood that progress is an uneven road, and that each stumble can teach more than a week of victories. Falling is part of walking. In the following days, he resisted guilt. Instead of punishing himself, he examined what led to excess, the environment, the emotion, the impulse. That active awareness was part of Kaizen, constant improvement through observation. By studying his mistakes, he turned them into tools of growth, carving wisdom where once there was shame. Yamamoto reminded him, self-discipline that ignores mistakes is weak. The one that learns from them is invincible. Christopher began to see failure as a mirror, not a burden. When he accepted his flaws, his identity grew stronger because it was now built on honesty, not illusion. Strength came from truth, not perfection. He started practicing wabi-sabi beyond food too. On days he skipped training, he didn't punish himself. He adjusted. When he woke tired, he did half the routine. That kept him loyal to Kaizen. Do something, no matter how little. Consistency mattered more than intensity. Progress, after all, doesn't need to be flawless to be real. With time, he saw that perfection was the greatest enemy of constancy. The fear of failing stops more people than failure itself. But those who accept mistakes keep moving. The secret of wabi-sabi is that it frees self-discipline from rigidity, transforming it into something human, kind, and sustainable. One day, Christopher wrote in his journal, "Being imperfect is what allows me to grow." That sentence followed him through every difficult moment. The doctor used to say progress is like the moon, sometimes full, sometimes shadowed, but always present. Consistency is that tide that always returns, even after chaos. When he looked in the mirror now, Christopher no longer saw flaws. He saw a story. Each fall, each relapse, each regret became part of the construction of his new identity. Imperfection wasn't something to hide, but something to honor. It was proof that he was alive, learning, and still evolving. He understood that Kaizen isn't a straight line, but a spiral that keeps rising, even when it loops back. Each repetition made him stronger. Each error made him wiser. Self-discipline turned from self-punishment into compassion, and consistency finally had a soul. The process had become as valuable as the goal. Yamamoto reminded him, beauty isn't in perfection, but in continuity. That sentence became his compass. Christopher applied it even in conversations at home, listening more, judging less. The same man who once over-controlled everything was now learning to laugh at his own mistakes and live with peace instead of pressure. That new perspective changed everything. He no longer saw relapses as failures, but as pauses in rhythm. And that's essential for lasting self-discipline. The body must rest, the mind must breathe, and the heart must forgive. Wabi-sabi became his reminder that growth includes every phase, even the messy ones. Christopher began noticing how the world itself was imperfect, sunsets not symmetrical, trees not straight, yet everything beautiful. Life, he thought, is also an unfinished artwork. Kaizen gives it motion, wabi-sabi gives it grace. Together, they make the journey whole, imperfectly perfect. He realized perfection is a prison disguised as virtue. Those who chase flawlessness become fragile, unable to learn from mistakes. But those who practice wabi-sabi build quiet strength rooted in patience, acceptance, and consistency. It's the art of staying grounded while embracing the cracks of life. And it was that calm strength that prepared Christopher for what came next. Because after learning to accept his imperfections, he would now discover the power of endurance, the fuel that keeps you standing even when everything seems to fall apart. Christopher believed he already understood everything about discipline until Dr. Yamamoto introduced him to Gambaro, a Japanese word meaning to persevere even when it's hard. It's not about always winning, the doctor said, but about continuing even when you're tired. This philosophy would elevate his self-discipline to a higher level, the realm of silent endurance that builds unshakable character. In the first days practicing Gambaro, he noticed it wasn't pain that defeated him, but discouragement. The mind gives up long before the body does. So he began testing his limits with small challenges. Getting up 5 minutes earlier, walking in the rain, finishing tasks without procrastinating. Those little trials of consistency forged a mental armor thicker than excuses. The doctor told him that pain is temporary, but the character molded by persistence is eternal. Christopher realized that to sustain Kaizen, he needed emotional endurance, the strength to face discomfort without losing focus. Gambaro wasn't only about physical toughness. It was about enduring boredom, doubt, and fear without breaking rhythm. There were days when nothing worked. The scale stopped moving, the body ached, and motivation vanished. But Gambaro taught him that true self-discipline doesn't rely on inspiration, only on decision. He began to see discomfort as invisible training, the kind that doesn't show in the mirror but fortifies the soul with quiet power. Christopher realized most people quit not because they're weak, but because they wait to feel ready. Gambaro teaches the opposite. Act even when you don't want to. Each time he moved despite fatigue, he strengthened not just his body, but his identity. He was no longer a man who tried. He was a man who didn't retreat. Yamamoto warned him, "You can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails." That phrase stayed with him on rough days. He learned to adapt without surrendering, to change strategy without abandoning direction. The secret of consistency lies in persistence amid uncertainty, and staying the course when comfort disappears. Endurance became his ally. He started applying Gambaro everywhere, at work, in relationships, in study. When something felt impossible, he took a deep breath and told himself, "Just one more step." That simple phrase, repeated daily, became the invisible fuel of his self-discipline. Momentum replaced motivation. The doctor challenged him to a silence drill. Remain still and focused for 5 minutes, even in discomfort. At first it felt unbearable. Then he realized that body control comes from mind control. Kaizen and Gambaro became partners. Improve a little, persist always. Growth through stillness. Christopher learned that pain could transform into self-respect. Every time he resisted quitting, he felt stronger. It was as if his identity was forged in fire. Consistency stopped being a goal and became his nature. The quiet endurance he cultivated spoke louder than any speech about willpower. Gambaro also taught him patience with time. Real progress is slow but certain. He no longer chased fast results, only the honor of staying loyal to his journey. That silent constancy became his mark, a strength that required no audience. Those who keep going already win by not stopping. It changed his relationship with failure. He saw that quitting is a choice, while continuing is a decision. Self-discipline is built in the moments the mind screams enough. Gambaro taught him to whisper back, just a bit more. That extra bit, repeated endlessly, compounded into greatness. Over time, Christopher embodied what the doctor called soft strength, the ability to endure without hardening. He faced challenges calmly because he knew consistency was an act of honor, not luck. He no longer feared obstacles. He used them as fuel. Resilience became his natural rhythm. With every obstacle, his confidence grew. He saw that discomfort wasn't an enemy, but a teacher. Self-discipline isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to feel it without giving up. Kaizen guided his direction, and Gambaro kept him steady. One deliberate step after another, no matter how small. Yamamoto concluded one session saying, "The weak seek comfort, the strong seek purpose." Christopher smiled, knowing his purpose was now clear. Though his journey had brought great progress, one final lesson remained, the most profound of all. Transformation through identity, the inner rebirth that makes every habit eternal. Christopher had already learned the importance of small steps, consistency, and perseverance. But Dr. Yamamoto revealed what truly transforms a human being, identity. "You don't change what you do," the doctor said. "You change who you believe you are." That phrase engraved itself in his mind as the final turning point in his evolution and growth. Throughout his journey, Christopher had tried to change his behaviors, but now he understood that behaviors are consequences, not causes. Real Kaizen happens when self-discipline stops being an effort and becomes a natural expression of identity. He didn't need to fight himself anymore. He needed to become the man he was meant to be. Yamamoto explained that the brain acts according to what it believes to be true. If you see yourself as undisciplined, your actions will always confirm it. But if you begin to say, "I am a committed person," your behavior will follow. Consistency is born not from willpower, but from the image you hold of yourself. Belief shapes reality. Christopher began observing himself carefully. He noticed that when he said, "I'm trying to be disciplined," he still saw himself as his old self. So he changed the phrase to "I am disciplined." The effect was immediate. Every act of self-discipline became a vote of confidence, reinforcing his new identity with emotion and clarity. The doctor challenged him to write 3 statements defining who he was. Christopher wrote, "I am someone who keeps promises. I am someone who improves a little every day. I am someone who inspires through example." These declarations became his mental mirror, guiding his daily actions with kaizen, honesty, and deep purpose. He realized the secret of constancy lies in alignment. When actions and identity move together, consistency flows naturally. It's like rowing with the current instead of against it. He no longer needed to force himself to act. He simply acted in harmony with the person he was becoming. It was effortless progress. The doctor often said, "You don't build habits. You build the person who practices them." Christopher understood. The workout, the meal, the routine, all were reflections of something internal. His self-discipline was just the visible result of a solid mental system. And systems, unlike moods, don't depend on emotion. This internal shift brought him peace. He no longer compared himself to anyone because his only competition was his past self. Kaizen became personal. The journey was no longer about being the best. It was about being loyal to his own evolution. That realization freed him from insecurity and constant self-judgment. Gradually, people around him began to notice. Christopher no longer talked about discipline. He embodied it. His calm presence, steady tone, and centered focus spoke louder than words. Identity that was once aspiration had become reality. He had turned into someone who did the right thing even when no one was watching. That internal transformation echoed everywhere, in his healthier body, balanced finances, and deeper relationships. He realized that the outer world is just a mirror of the inner one. Once self-discipline was anchored inside, the universe responded outside. It was Kaizen fully alive, rippling through every corner of his life. Yamamoto made him reflect. You don't become disciplined by changing actions, but by rewriting your story. Christopher started to rewrite his mental narrative. Instead of saying, "I used to be weak," he now said, "I was learning to be strong." The power of language was shaping his identity one sentence at a time. The doctor warned him of something crucial. Identity is alive. It must be fed. So Christopher maintained daily rituals, reading, meditation, reflection. Each practice reinforced his consistency, keeping old patterns from returning. It was Kaizen of the mind, continuous renewal through awareness and repetition. The transformation became so deep he barely recognized the man who had started this journey. Yet what he felt wasn't pride. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the process, for the mistakes, for every lesson that had shaped him. Self-discipline was no longer a tool. It had become his natural state of being. He now understood that changing habits is temporary, but changing identity is permanent. When you truly believe you're the kind of person who honors commitments, consistency stops being a challenge and becomes part of your DNA. Christopher wasn't trying to transform his life anymore. He was the transformation. Then Dr. Yamamoto helped him see something even greater. When a person changes genuinely, they don't just change themselves, they change everyone around them. And that would be Christopher's next discovery. Christopher noticed the first change at home during breakfast. He prepared eggs and fruit, and his daughter asked why there were no pancakes with syrup. He smiled and said, "Because today we want to wake up light on the inside." The simplicity was contagious. The self-discipline that began with a glass of water now appeared on the family's plates, building a shared identity. His wife, curious, asked to understand the secret behind his steadiness. He explained Kaizen with an example. If we read 10 pages a day, finishing a book each month becomes inevitable. Together they chose a book, Atomic Habits, and created a nightly reading ritual. That consistency of 10 pages turned into bonding, laughter, and presence. Small habits, strong connection. On Sunday, they replaced TV marathons with a walk in the park. Nothing intense, just 40 minutes of slow steps and open eyes. The children collected leaves. He collected moments. The family learned that self-discipline isn't rigidity, it's prioritization. The body thanked, the mind slowed down, and the heart synced with gratitude. Identity became unity. Christopher did something simple. He hung a habit chart on the fridge. Morning water, daily walk, reading, gratitude before bed. Each check box was cause for celebration. Consistency now had a visible stage, and that visual progress motivated everyone. The kids competed playfully for check marks, turning effort into fun. That's Kaizen disguised as joy. Instead of giving lectures, he led silently. He slept earlier, left his phone outside the bedroom, and paused before responding to conflict. His wife noticed the new calmness. He said, "I prefer peace over being right." Emotional self-discipline set the tone at home, and the house became quieter on the inside. Identity evolved through example. At the grocery store, their approach changed too. List in hand, focus on nourishment, no wandering through temptation aisles. He explained the 80-20 cart, 80% functional food, 20% mindful indulgence. That weekly consistency reduced guilt and waste. Kaizen was working quietly, improving health and mindset through repetition. With finances, they adopted the 1% principle. Small daily savings, automatic monthly investments. Nothing heroic, just steady. The family watched compound interest work for them instead of against them. Financial self-discipline created emotional safety. Their identity shifted from scarcity to planning, and anxiety began to fade naturally. At school, his oldest son copied his method. He broke study sessions into 25-minute Pomodoro blocks with short breaks. Grades improved without stress. "It's just Kaizen for school, Mom," he said proudly. The whole house laughed. That consistency turned effort into rhythm, and learning became effortless fun. The youngest daughter started her own challenge. 3 acts of kindness a day. She wrote on colored paper. Help a friend, give a compliment, tidy toys without being asked. That self-discipline of kindness became her superpower. Christopher saw how character is trained through microactions. Identity had become compassion in motion. On exhausting nights, when tiredness threatened their rituals, Christopher proposed minimum versions. 5 pages, 10 squats, 3 minutes of breathing. The rule was better small than none. That flexibility protected consistency when life got messy. Kaizen doesn't demand perfection, only movement. The family learned rhythm over rigidity. He introduced a Sunday check-in at the table. Each person shared one lesson and one adjustment for the week ahead. No criticism, just reflection and shared solutions. Self-discipline became culture, not command. The house began to feel alive with intention. Identity was now something built together, with care and honesty. For spirituality, they created 1 minute of nightly silence. No labels, just stillness. At 9 p.m., an alarm chimed, and everyone paused to breathe and give thanks. That quiet minute nurtured peaceful sleep. The consistency of silence taught them to listen slowly. The Kaizen of the heart aligned their actions with awareness. At work, Christopher redesigned meetings. Agenda ready, on time, ending with next steps. Co-workers noticed the difference and asked for his template. He said, "It's just self-discipline applied to communication." Productivity rose, stress dropped, and clarity ruled. His professional identity earned respect without a single boast. When external criticism came, the family stayed grounded. Jokes about their boring routine didn't bother them. Christopher replied kindly, "We prefer a life with purpose." Their armor came from inner consistency, not outside approval. Kaizen moved forward, quietly and powerfully. Self-discipline had become comfort, not performance. Sundays gained a prep ritual. Plan meals, set the schedule, choose clothes, review goals. 30 minutes preventing hours of chaos. The family felt the power of minimal planning. Consistency grew because friction vanished. Their organized identity freed energy for creativity and joy. In the end, Christopher understood the true domino effect. He hadn't changed his family. He had lit his own light. When one person shines, the room learns the way. Self-discipline became invitation, not demand. Kaizen became culture, not duty. And consistency became the quiet legacy that would live on through them all. As the years passed, Christopher realized his progress was no longer just physical or mental. It was spiritual. Consistency had left invisible marks, peace in his eyes, steadiness in his voice, lightness in his actions. He understood that constancy is the silent bridge between what you dream and what you live. It turns time into legacy and habit into inheritance. Dr. Yamamoto, now older, watched him with quiet pride. "You are no longer the student, Christopher. You have become the example." Those words moved him deeply. He realized the true teacher is not the one who speaks, but the one who inspires without effort. His self-discipline had become contagious, a spark that lit others without burning out. People around him began to change just by observing. Sedentary friends started walking, co-workers learned to plan, even strangers sought his advice. His consistency had created a ripple that crossed boundaries. Kaizen was no longer a method. It had become his way of being, a rhythm of purpose flowing through every gesture. He understood that the greatest gift anyone can leave isn't wealth, but example. The legacy of self-discipline is to show that transformation is possible for anyone who chooses small daily actions. The years do the rest. Tiny habits, practiced with consistency, can shape entire generations quietly but powerfully. Yamamoto told him that true success is becoming the kind of person others can learn from in silence. Christopher lived that truth. He didn't preach, he embodied. His calm routine, balanced posture, and thoughtful responses spoke louder than motivation ever could. The essence of Kaizen ran through his blood. One day, he found his old notebook and saw the first page. "Drink a glass of water every morning." He smiled, amazed. Who could imagine that everything began with something so small? His self-discipline had matured into a system, strong, peaceful, and unshakable. That system now defined his entire identity. He realized that legacy isn't planned, it's lived. You don't decide to leave an example. You build it day by day through consistency. The world listens to what you repeatedly do, not to what you say once. Living Kaizen sincerely is enough to inspire those who cross your path. When his son turned 18, he asked, "Dad, what's the secret to never giving up?" Christopher answered, "Don't fall in love with results. Fall in love with the process." That phrase became the family motto. He knew that self-discipline is like a seed. Its growth depends only on daily care and faith in time. The doctor once said, "Mountains don't remember who ran fast, only who reached the top." That metaphor stayed forever in his mind. Consistency sustains the climb when excitement fades. There's nobility in perseverance, in moving forward when no one watches. That quiet strength became his highest achievement. Christopher began teaching what he'd learned, not as a lecturer, but as a humble mentor. He shared Kaizen with young people searching for purpose, showing them that self-discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. Freedom to choose the right thing, even when the wrong feels easier. That was the true meaning of mastery. He also learned to see time differently, not as an enemy, but as an ally. Each sunrise was a new opportunity to reaffirm his identity, to practice Kaizen once more. Life, he thought, is a long training session, and time is the teacher that never stops testing you. The most beautiful part was that his change was no longer his alone. His once skeptical wife became a defender of mindful habits. His children grew with purpose, patience, and calm. Family consistency spread like a fragrance, subtle yet unforgettable. Legacy wasn't spoken, it was felt. He learned that self-discipline doesn't end when you reach the goal. It evolves into instinct, into wisdom. He no longer needed to try to be consistent. He simply was. That is the rarest victory of all, when effort transforms into essence, when constancy becomes nature. One morning, watching the sunrise, he remembered Yamamoto's words, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start." Everything made sense now. Kaizen had carried him from weakness to strength, from haste to patience, from confusion to clarity. Above all, it had made him living proof of consistency. And so his story didn't end, it expanded. Everyone who witnessed his transformation began to believe in their own. The legacy of identity is this, to awaken belief in others. Christopher hadn't just practiced Kaizen. He had become its living embodiment, a man shaped by purpose, perseverance, and quiet greatness. The truth is simple, yet few dare to accept it. No one changes overnight. You don't wake up a new person, you build yourself, step by step, with self-discipline and patience. And the curious thing is that, in the end, you realize haste was your biggest enemy all along. Life begins to shift when you stop chasing intensity and start valuing consistency. That's how the Japanese build unbreakable minds, with small daily gestures that create eternal results. Think about it. What would happen if, starting tomorrow, you simply did the basics every day? Not the perfect plan, not the ideal routine, just the essential, repeated with intention. Kaizen teaches that it's impossible to fail when you improve a little each day. Just 1%. But that 1%, compounded over time, changes everything. Your body, your mind, your destiny. You don't need to rush. You only need to continue. Self-discipline isn't a cage, it's the road to freedom. It frees you from chaos, procrastination, and confusion. And when consistency becomes part of your identity, life finally flows in rhythm. Doing the right thing stops being forced. It becomes who you are. So ask yourself, what's the smallest step you can take today? It could be drinking water, turning off your phone 30 minutes early, walking for 10 minutes, reading 2 pages of a book. The size of the action doesn't matter, as long as it's intentional. That's the start of your personal Kaizen, the start of your rebirth. Remember, constancy is the bridge between who you are and who you're meant to be, and discipline is the path that takes you there. Now it's your turn. Apply what you've learned here. Be the person who keeps promises, grows in silence, and leads by example. Let self-discipline reveal your true potential. And if this message helped you, subscribe and turn on notifications, because here, every video is another step forward on your path of evolution. Small steps, great results. The Japanese method to master yourself begins now.